And one of the things that they've benefited from in Canada up until this point, although less in recent years, is that they don't have the corrosive, democracy-destroying sort of media that we have here, that is designed to facilitate the purchase and promotion of ads, that the main source that money goes towards in politics, distorting the facts, give this false sense of balance that makes the craziest whack job on the right seem to be as relevant as the vast majority of all the scientists in an area. Now, I've heard that in recent years, Canada has, there have been some attempts to develop something akin to Fox News there, but they don't have a juggernaut of the source that we have here, by far the most popular mainstream cable news outlet. But you were talking about some of the policies and how out of step he is with the Canadian people. I want to talk about some of those policies briefly. So Thomas Mulcair of the NDP insists that Canada should accept 10,000 Syrian refugees by the end of this year. Liberal leader Justin Trudeau has pushed that number up to 25,000, but Harper has promised to only accept 10,000 refugees over the course of 4 years if he wins re-election. He also says that further military action is needed in Iraq and Syria to curb the flow of refugees. So that sounds like maybe getting involved to a deeper extent than they already are. Harper also, he decided to make the election partially about a sort of odd issue. If you have this sort of liberal push, this liberal wave happening, he wants to continue pushing to ban the niqab, a veil worn by some Muslim women that partially covers the face at citizenship ceremonies and for public servants. Like that's the sort of thing that Mike Huckabee would do, or Rick Santorum would do. But he's the reigning, like the fact that he's pushing for that. At this point, when you see over the past couple of years how the Liberals have been sort of surging, it's a very odd choice to make.
And in fact, the Liberal Party outlived the NDP by saying, no, not 10,000 a year, 25,000 a year. Yeah. And apparently it's working well for them because they're the ones that are surging.
Yeah.
But conservatives kind of can't help themselves. You know, like, the other, so afraid. please, to make them take it off. And look, this is... Although that is not very conservative to make women take off their clothing. Okay, and this is a debate that rages throughout the world, including in Turkey and in France. And in France, they are going in a similar direction where they want to make sure they don't wear those clothes when they go to do official ceremonies. And that's why the French part of Canada is a little bit more supportive of that. So that is some internal politics in Canada.
Yeah, exactly.
I think the difference between the candidates in Canada that's starkest, especially compared to the U.S., is on the environment. So now Canada gets a lot of its money from oil. Keystone XL pipeline is a huge issue here in the U.S., but even more so in Canada because it's a huge source of revenue for them. Now, it's some of the worst fossil fuel in the world in terms of how it affects greenhouse gases and climate change. And but it's hard to get off of it when you're addicted to that. Now, part of what's hurting Harper is that, well, oil prices are down. And when they're down, all of a sudden you're not making as much revenue.
Yeah.
And since, as John has pointed out in the past, Canada doesn't have the same kind of corporate media that we do that is so conservative, so pro anything that makes money for corporations in the world. They actually have a completely different opinion on climate change. 80% of the people of Canada say that the government needs to do more in fighting climate change, even though it's a huge source of revenue for them, the dirty fossil fuels that they're selling out of Canada. Here in the U.S., it's a 50-50 proposition because our corporate media keeps calling it 50-50.
Yeah.
And they blanket the television airwaves with some say this and some say that. And they don't bother to tell you the Republican politicians saying that are funded by ExxonMobil and also the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yeah. Well, then, of course, they'd be interested in it. I think we could raise that number in America. Perhaps if we could get 150% of all scientists to support the idea that we're responsible for this and should do something about it.
So isn't it amazing that based on and this is why I talk about institutional change in America, you need to change the system. Because based on a little change in the system, for example, who is allowed to be in the media and how they serve, whether they serve the audience or not, Canada actually knows more than we do. Their population, it literally has access
better informed on the issues.
To information than we do, right? Yeah. And having better access to information makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
So that's why Harper, who is on the more conservative side on the environmental issue, is losing out to the Liberal Party and the NDP, who are far more gung-ho to actually do something about climate change.
Yeah, and look, we love to joke about the relationship between America and Canada, but obviously they have fundamentally different, a fundamentally different value system, and in some ways, it certainly benefits them. If it produces a population that cares about our responsibility to the rest of the world going forward for future generations, that's a good thing. And look, America, we've done great economically for a long time, even in our recession, doing better than many countries. But this obsession with being number one and being willing to do anything, engage in any number of military conflicts, trade policies to stay number one, that hasn't necessarily benefited us in every way. And countries like Canada, who are politically more humble, and European countries as well, can end up doing better overall in terms of not necessarily the economy recently because of the downturn in oil prices, but you look at the numbers for overall happiness, life satisfaction, and things like that, and they are beating us, perhaps because of their underlying value system that is focused a little bit more on people being decent and less on freedom at any cost and holding as many pistols in your arms as you can possibly get.
So now, conservatives here in America...
I love America, though.
Yeah.
It's great.
But we're number one!
It's the best.
Okay. Conservatives here in America would counter John with, look, if you give access to people to information, then they're going to go in a more liberal direction, like less guns, because it leads to less homicides, right?
Yeah.
And less, pollution and all the, the carbon in the air, because it turns out the facts support the fact that we'll be burning up the planet.
Yeah.
So obviously, reality has a well-known liberal bias. Yeah. That's why we don't allow it in the U.S.
Yeah. That's the next thing they're going to burn after the climate.
Reality. Well, they're in the middle of burning as we speak.